You ready?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. I believe it says that we are already live streaming. So let me give Alex just a moment to connect.
Laura, I would go because it's going to take the router a little time to boot.
Okay, no problem at all. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Safdie, and I am very excited to say that we are starting our third installment of the advisory board right now. I am also very excited to be a guest moderator here today. Normally, our moderator is Jake Heller, our CEO and founder, but this morning we got the very exciting news that Jake's new baby is coming early, so everyone is just going to have to tolerate doing this with me today. We usually, Jake, myself, and other leaders at Casetext regularly speak with leaders at law firms, in-house legal departments, venture capital, and institutional investors and other entrepreneurs to stay in the know about developments in the legal market. So the idea of this series is to open up those conversations to everyone who's interested in the legal field and investments in that space. So I'll start by introducing our topic for today, which we've gotten a ton of interest on, how venture capital and law firms are approaching investments in legal tech in the wake of COVID-19. From funding startups to purchasing new tools, and how leaders in that space are thinking about those issues. So I'm very excited to introduce our guests today, Marlene Gebauer, Jeroen Flink, and Alex Nwaka. Marlene is the Global Director of Strategic Legal Insights at Greenberg Traurig. She has previously served in knowledge management and library roles within the firm. Her role includes oversight of the data analytics, knowledge management, and information practice support platforms. And she's also the co-host of the Geek and Review podcast. So thank you for joining us today, Marlene.
Thank you.
Jeroen, a good friend of the company, is the CEO of Clifford Chance Applied Solutions, a subsidiary of Clifford Chance law firm that builds solutions combining software and legal expertise for the firm. He himself is an entrepreneur and the former CEO of Practical Law Company US. He serves as an advisor to a number of legal technology companies, including Casetext, and I am indebted to him for many years of advice. So thank you, Jeroen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And finally, last but not least, and luckily enough, we just got his power back in his house, so we got him in video. Thank you. Alex Nwaka is a principal at Touchdown Ventures, a fund that helps companies run professional venture capital programs. At Touchdown, Alex focuses on enterprise software, disrupting the future of professional services, including, of course, legal. Includes legal tech and intelligent enterprise solutions. Alex told me the other day that he's investigated around 300 legal technology companies, and out of that has made 5 investments. So do the math on that. It's a pretty high bar. Alex began his career as a banker at Morgan Stanley and UBS before stints at Virgin Management and Estee Lauder companies in investing and strategy roles. He holds a BS in economics from Wharton School and MBA from Columbia Business School, and has also been a great advisor to the company. So Alex, Jeroen, Marlene, thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm just going to kick us off. My objective here, both because I am a guest moderator, but also because Jake and I both recognize that our view of this industry is a narrow one, and we have 3 major experts on the line, as I want to, ask some questions and prompt conversation, but, take a back seat and hear from Jeroen, Marlene, and Alex. I know Casetext and every other venture-backed legal tech company or aspiring venture-backed legal tech company are following trends closely now, both in terms of the trends in the legal market before the pandemic and what the pandemic and subsequent economic upheaval has done to the capital markets in the space. So just to kick us off, I'm curious, how are each of you seeing the current economic situation and pandemic impacting law firms' interest in legal technology or other innovative solutions to address some of their bigger challenges? Are you seeing a change in the firm's appetite to purchase solutions? Are you seeing them more or less interested in developing solutions in-house? What have you guys seen? Maybe Jeroen, you can kick us off.
Sure. I mean, that's a fairly involved question. I think the immediate reaction to the COVID-19 crisis has actually been positive for law firms. I think if you told many law firm partners 4 or 5 months ago you'd all be working remotely, they would think you're barking mad. And in fact, I love your clock, Marlene. That's a great background sound. And I mean, I think it's testament to those firms that have made the good investments in technology that many of the firms were able to start operating remotely within the course of a couple of days. I think the question on law firm investing has a number of different aspects. So developing technology in-house, depending on what it is for, I think law firms shouldn't do it at all. Developing software products for use internally, I don't think is a good idea because you miss the input that you get from many different customers. So I'm hoping to the extent that happens, we can put a stop to it. Developing things for clients, which is my core business at the moment, I think that remains a good idea. I don't think there's a trend of law firms. I mean, I think about the 5 to 7 law firms in the United States that are doing this, developing tools for clients, and obviously I think it's a great idea, but I'm hoping to discourage other law firms to enter that market.
That's because you think of the opportunity isn't there, or you want to dominate that opportunity?
I want to dominate that opportunity as always.
Understood.
I think law firms investing in venture capital, or as if they were venture capitalists, I'm fairly against that. I would advise doing that unless you do it in the way that Alex does that with Touchdown Ventures, where their backers are law firms. I think law firms are not the best investors, and so I would advise most law firms to stay away from it. There's no law firm that has the capacity to look at over 300 companies and evaluate a proposition, not just as, hey, this might be a good product, we might buy it, but are they able to build a company? So that's a bit of a long-winded lawyer answer.
That's fine.
Which I end with, it depends.
Okay, well, there's a lot to dig into there, which is great. But before I do, I will note that I did my first error in being the moderator today and didn't hit record at the beginning. So just to bring us all back real quick, welcome to the advisory board. This is your window into conversations that usually happen behind closed doors about the biggest challenges facing the legal industry. I'm Laura Safdie. I'm the CEO and General Counsel at Casetext, and we are joined by Marlene Gabauer, the Global Director of Strategic Legal Insights at Greenberg Traurig, Jeroen Plink, who you just heard, the CEO of Clifford Chance Applied Solutions, and Alex Nwaka, a principal at Touchdown Ventures. So back to it. Jeroen said, I'm sure, perhaps controversially, law firms are not the best investors. Alex, your response. Alex, we can't hear you, actually. Can't hear. So while Alex is working,
sorry about that.
Great.
Yeah, I muted on my phone, muted on here, so sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a very controversial point. I think the reality is if you look at how law firms are structured and what their incentives are, generally speaking, these are not organizations that are set up to invest, in the future, especially given, again, the structure of partnerships, the fact that, most, senior partners that probably throw the most weight around in terms of making decisions like this are closer to being out the door at the firm versus, there for the next, 10 to 20 years. really just sets up, what I would call a dissonance between, investing for sort of a long-term horizon versus, again, continuing with the status quo and making small adjustments, when forced to. And so given that venture capital is a long-term asset class, where you're investing with a, 10 to 15-year horizon, there's just really a dissonance in sort of the timeline perspective and when, when to make investments. And again, I always laugh because I don't ever try to tell a doctor like how to do their job or, tell, somebody else who's like trained in what they do and have gone to school to do something particular that I know nothing about. And so I just always find it interesting that, folks who don't have venture capital experience trying to do venture capital, usually, there's usually some fits and starts at the very least. And in some cases we've noticed in the corporate venture world, which is, what we're part of, we've seen, some very, I would say public failures of corporate venture funds by certain, corporations in different industries. And so, I just think it's a asset class that, law firms are not well suited or set up from their DNA to participate in. That being said, I think to Haroon's point, there's a lot of different ways that law firms can innovate that don't necessarily involve investing in venture capital. There's all sorts of tools that they can build in-house or even partnerships, right, work. And so I think that there should be an all of the above approach. I think that's the holy grail. But being able to do all of the above well is obviously very difficult.
That is definitely true and potentially an understatement. Law firms have a lot on their plate, so I definitely understand that perspective. Marlene, maybe you can share your perspective from inside the firm. Do you see a change based on the current economic situation to the firm's appetite to go to outside solutions, legal technology, other innovation to help address some of the firm's problems?
Yeah, and just, we're speaking generally in terms of the
generally, of course,
industry.
sorry, in terms
generally,
of the industry, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, you are seeing that. I mean, while I can't speak to venture, capital investments, what I can say that I'm seeing is that, firms are really looking at this opportunity to work with their clients on developing solutions that are, real problems now. You see a lot of firms with developing these sort of third-party organizations that can either work with vendors or work directly with clients to, come up with different types of either process-oriented or technology-oriented solutions. At the same time, what you are seeing because of COVID is, there is a, cash conservation effort, at least at the firm level. And so firms, I think, are looking really hard at their platforms to see, what is it that we truly need, and actually, in a good way, it's like making better use of what they've had before. Haroon mentioned this before that people would have, a few months ago being like, yeah, I'm going to work from home all the time. That's never going to happen, and now they are, and they suddenly have to get up to speed on a lot of things very, very quickly. And so that has been a real focus. And so these products that perhaps have been maybe ignored a little bit are now being thrust into the forefront and are being used.
It's true. Things are changing really quickly. I'm curious, from your perspective, from Jeroen's perspective, what do you think sets a law firm up well to develop tools for clients? Obviously, not every firm is pursuing that, and probably not every firm should.
Again, I'm very biased on this point. I can only tell you what we've done. We've built a team of people that have built products before. So the majority of my team have product development experience. We've also hired a go-to-market team, and I think the combination of those two, coupled with the legal expertise or the global legal expertise of Clifford Chance, puts us in a good position to be building applications. I think the successful law firm subsidiaries have taken a similar approach. I see too often people thinking, okay, well, we'll just build an app for that. That never that never works out.
Why not?
Building an application that you're trying to sell to clients is, as you know from your experience at Casetext, is very involved, and most people ignore things like security and user interface and all those sort of things. And so we've built a team that has years of experience doing exactly that.
So basically implicit in that is a firm that has the capacity to have all the functions that a technology company would have, I assume, product development, really strong engineers, design, user feedback, all of that is necessary to do that well.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you find?
I mean, one thing I would add to that, Laura. I mean, I think that when you think about how the let's call it the legal services industry develops, over the next 10 years or 15 years, I do think that there's a tremendous amount of competitive advantage that can be developed here, sort of in the next 3 to 5 years. I do think that technology is one vector of many, but one that I think has a lot of potential. And, back to my earlier statement and very consistent with what, Haroon just said, I think that there's all different types of ways of developing technology. Some of it is to work with partner with an outside company, whether it's a startup or a more, mature company. I do think that, venture capital, funding and innovation also has, a place to play, especially with the firms that have the resources to do it. And then there's also just some of the internal development that we just talked about. But I do think that we'll increasingly see firms in different rungs that do compete against each other regularly, starting to really differentiate themselves based on their technological fluency at the very least, and maybe also technological capabilities if we take that one step further. And so I actually think it's going to be a theater, if you will, in sort of the competitive landscape over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think the firms that are investing now, when it seems like, why would you need to, because the world hasn't changed yet, are going to be, on their back foot a bit, is my guess, when we start talking about 5 to 10 years in the future.
I'd want to add on that. It's like, too often you see the solution looking for a problem, and we don't want to be in that position. I really think that it's important to really have a conversation with your clients and talk to them and sort of understand what their needs are and understand what it is that they want. What is it that they're doing that you can help them with? And I know that seems really simple, but it's amazing when we talk about technology that people are kind of off to the races when they see the new coolest thing. And, you really have to look and say, okay, what's going to help them with their business and how can we help with that? And then work together on that. And that's how you want to focus your investments.
I think that's a very important point that you're making there, Marlene. It's the conversation with the clients. That's ultimately what's driving adoption and success of any applications that you develop. So I favor very much a talk to your clients instead of build and they will come approach.
Those comments are so important. It's something I'm very curious about, whether law firms find themselves fluent in that product development process. I think, as I hope Marlene would attest to, Casetext, when we started developing Compose, which is the tool that lawyers are now increasingly using to write briefs faster at a more consistent level of quality with the support of technology, we spoke with over 100 lawyers and KM directors and managing partners to really as best we can, really understand their needs. And then after developing it, go back to them, get feedback. And that is just such a hugely involved process that requires a range of skill sets. And I'm always curious that if law firms developing these tools for clients have the capacity to do the same sort of thing.
I would say that you're absolutely right in terms of the testing process is a very arduous process, and it takes some time, and you really have to get the right people involved to do that. Whether that be testing at the firm level in terms of a product that's going to support the attorneys, or whether it's something that you're working together with, with a client. And, hopefully you have the right people on both sides to do that. People like, like process managers and, depending on the product, you'll have technology experts, you might have knowledge management experts, you might have, UX people, you might have data scientists. And, I really think that these types of opportunities have really opened the door for these types of folks at firms to really get much more involved at that level.
That's really interesting. I want to go back to something Alex said earlier that I thought was extremely interesting, the idea of firms being on a kind of a spectrum of tech fluency versus tech capabilities, being actually able to execute on the technology themselves. The tech fluency we see a lot when we talk to law firm clients. They're telling us how when responding to RFPs and when talking to potential clients and existing clients, they're touting more their fluency in technology, the fact that they're leveraging outside solutions to help solve problems, to be more efficient, to do more with less, all of that. The tech capability side is the part I think that's really interesting. I mean, on the venture side of this, are we looking at law firms more as potential drivers of the actual technological innovation? Is that something that you're seeing more of, Alex?
I would say less so that, just because, I've generally, looked at, who are the constituencies that will drive, actual real meaningful change in an industry and an overall structure of an industry. And I just think the case here is the purse strings are on the in-house side. They are the big clients of the big law firms. And I think you'll see, any change that you will see towards moving towards the adoption of certain types of technologies is going to have to come from that constituency. I just don't think that there's the inherent, incentives in place from a law firm perspective to change things really drastically, really fast. I do think it's a point of differentiation long term, but again, I always look at innovation cycles as, what are the things that are going to solve people's problems or change the world in the next 1 to 3 years, then 3 to 5 years, and then 5 to 10 years. And I think the results, frankly, of COVID is that the latter two buckets of like 3 to 5 years and 5 to 10 years, I think that those are just lower priority right now. I think the stuff that's like near term, like 1 to 2 years, right, that, probably are overdue or behind schedule, are being accelerated in a way that they were not going to be had we not seen this massive move to work from home and work remote. And so those are the type of things that I think are really interesting, but those are also investments in things that are probably to a lot of people very boring. They're infrastructure plays. They are, just very typical system stuff, right? So e-billing, legal spend management, like stuff that's not going to knock your socks off. And a lot of other industry verticals have had these types of technologies implemented in certain functions for, in some cases, like, 10 to, 20 years. I mean, I've run across companies that are like, we're the Salesforce for X in legal. And I'm like, Salesforce is almost a 20-year-old company. And so just if you think about like sales and marketing, just looking as an example, let's call it industry wide, right? Across, healthcare or what have you, the things that have been sold into that function are nowhere present in legal at all. And so I think that's a, on one hand, it's depressing, but on the other hand, it's like you can't stay in this space forever where the level of technology or software adoption is so low for an industry that, really has a lot of incentives, both from the client side and also long-term viability to start investing in that.
Are you seeing do you expect the rate of adoption to go up now that we're more focused on these like concrete, short-term, immediate needs?
Yeah, I think you'll see firms, that haven't invested in their infrastructure start to invest in their infrastructure because they have to. I mean, there's no way that if you weren't set up to, really enable remote work, that is a tenable situation right now, or has been for the last 3 months. And I think that there's, a lot of uncertainty in terms of when we see the other side of this pandemic. But I just think it's like that's a burning necessity right now. But I think all the things that were like nice to haves, right? That, it would be great if we could, completely automate this process, right? Sure, they may still think about it as a priority, but it's definitely not a near-term thing where they need to figure out how to get their people with the right, technology, the right capabilities to do their job as it exists today, in person versus remote.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would echo most of what Alex just said. I mean, I left Clifford Chance as an attorney 20 years ago, and some of the things in the tech stack really haven't changed, and it mostly is around the boring infrastructure stuff. And I think the lawyer that uses their computer screen as an extra light on their desk, that person has left the firm. But I don't think the adoption of technology tools is far enough along. I think the other portion is the boring systems. They haven't been addressed yet. We're still, I know quite a few firms that are still working on matter management systems and financial systems that were built 20 to 25 years ago. And as an example, I'm not making any expenses right now because I'm not traveling, but my expenses cannot be done because my assistant is not in the office. And so those are things that are going to have to be changed pretty soon.
I agree with the fact that technology is not moving as quickly as perhaps all of us would like. But I also got to wonder, is it, are we really seeing the drive from the in-house side? Because, what my experience is that they're looking for some of these standard types of things, automating the contract process, the contract, life cycle process. They're looking for some of these meat and potatoes types of systems. So are they really driving us the way we want to?
I think the in-house picture is very mixed. I think there are some that are really sophisticated and are driving change and are expecting their law firms to be further ahead. But there's many that still have a long way to go on their maturity level as far as understanding technology. Remember, the people that are in leadership positions in many many in-house departments came from the same law firms that are behind in technology. So they haven't seen much difference. I think the U.S. law firms or the U.S. in-house departments are way ahead of their European counterparts and are in many aspects are way ahead of the U.S. law firms. But they're still quite far behind. And the questions we get, we develop technology for in-house departments. And one of the tools we have is a document automation engine, which is based on 25-year-old technology. And every time a customer comes to us and says, hey, we want you to help us with document automation, turns out they don't want document automation. They want something completely different. Most of them want contract lifecycle management, which is quite different from just generating a contract on an automated basis. So I think both in-house and law firms have a long way to go to a more digital environment.
And I would add to that, there's other dynamics that would also come into play there. So one thing to consider with in-house is, depending on what your viewpoint is over the next 5 years of whether in-house continues to insource work and try to handle more things and more functions and pieces of work themselves, I'm a bit skeptical of that happening. I actually think what we will see if we, see sort of a more sustained recession, I don't foresee the legal departments in most organizations, Fortune 500, let's call it, getting more budget. And in which case, I don't think they necessarily cut their law firm spend, but I think that they have to, in some ways, ask for their law firms to provide a little bit more for for the same amount, right? So I think that that has a little inherent push on the law firms. It depends on how far that goes. And then the one thing that we're not really talking about that I think is also a really big driver of potential change for the law firms is I think the biggest existential threat to the upper tier of law firms in the U.S. is the Big Four. And these are organizations that are investing, have already invested very heavily in technology. And obviously there's some regulatory, hurdles there, and there's reasons why we haven't seen, the Big Four. But I think if you look at E&Y as an example, they've clearly made a number of acquisitions and made a big push there. And I think that that's another reason for law firms to kind of look and say, again, what is our value proposition to our clients, and is it wide enough and broad enough to compete long term with some very sophisticated players and platforms in the Big Four?
It's quite obvious that you and I have been speaking for a while, because I think the point on the Big Four is something you and I clearly agree on. I think that is a big threat. I think the regulatory issues can be overcome. I think just not to completely echo you, one of the things I think will happen is with reduced budgets, I think in-house departments will actually have a more sophisticated approach to handing out the work. So the high-value work will continue to go to the big law firms. I don't see that moving directly to the Big Four. The high volume and medium complexity stuff, I think that will move to Big Four faster than you can say, pretty much anything. I think that is happening. You see it with big projects. We were looking at one large bank the other day who, for one particular exercise, which would have been spot on for law firms, has not instructed or has not invited any law firms to pitch. And 5 years ago, that would have been law firm work. And now it's going to the Big Four or to the law companies. So I think that you'll see a shift in who gets the work.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to that's what you're seeing some of these subsidiaries form. And, I think that is in direct response to what's happening with the Big Four.
Yeah. I mean, I think Greenberg Traurig, your subsidiary is focusing on that. We're doing similar things in our low-cost centers in Newcastle and Delhi. So I think the smart law firms are responding to that. And some law firms choose to make a differentiation and say we only want to focus on the high value work, and we're fine if some of that work goes to other players. And so you'll see more collaborations also between the Big Four law firms and law companies.
So you guys are all seemingly on the same page on this issue. I find this super interesting. Why do you guys think that the Big Four is the best place for this high volume, run the company litigation versus other strategies firms may employ to do more with less, to be more efficient, whether it's technology solutions, whether it's specializing, whether it's insourcing or bringing in outside, contract providers? Of all the potential options for firms, why is or for an in-house department, why do you think the Big Four is the answer?
I don't think it's actually litigation. I think it's more transactional and advisory work. And there the answer, in my opinion, is quite simple. And anytime I say something smart, I mostly copy it from Bruce McEwen. He wrote a great article a few years back where he referred to the Big Four as the biggest threat. And I think he mentioned 4 points. One is they have the brand recognition. Ask any board to define the Big Four, and they will be able to do that. Ask any board member to name the top 10 firms in the Emerald 200, and I don't think they'll come up with that. So the brand, I think they've got the global coverage. I mean, Clifford Chance is one of the world's largest law firms, but we don't have offices in 72 countries like PwC Legal. I think they've proven that they can do it in other areas. If you'd asked 20 years ago, would you see your big four accountant do strategy consulting and compete with the likes of Accenture? I don't think you would expect that to happen, but they've done that, and they are in management consulting and in various other areas. And they got the war chest and the employee base to do it. And the only smart thing that I say about it, they also have the incentive. The average revenue for an AmLaw 100 firm far exceeds, or per employee, far exceeds the average revenue per employee for a Big Four. So there are profits and revenues to be had if the Big Four move into the area. So for those 5 reasons, I think they're a formidable competitor.
So what do law firms do?
Yeah, and I mean,
Marlene, please.
Well, I was going to talk about something else, but
no, go ahead.
That we have an ethics. We have the lawyers have an ethical challenge in terms of what they can and can't do, and so I think that the Big Four have a lot more flexibility in terms of what they can do. Also, that's where all their financial work is already housed. So, it just sort of makes a lot of sense that, okay, we take our legal work there too, and we basically have it in one spot and simplify things. In terms of what firms do about it, well, I mean, I think that they are taking steps to do things more like that. And, we talked about the subsidiary, so they're trying to sort of move beyond sort of the regulations that and the rules that they're bound by to be able to offer things that the client wants at a and more efficiently and more effectively and at a better rate. I think firms have to maybe again, sort of the old structure and the structure that we all know in terms of partnerships and things like that. Maybe that and billable hours. Maybe that's not really an incentive for us to be innovative and to do things in a different way.
Yeah, and I'd add to that and just say that I think that there's a reevaluation that will shake out or take place over the next, whatever it's 3 to 5 years around what is your value prop to your customers, your clients. And I think that reevaluation will involve is that a sustainable value proposition? And I think, Haroon is right in that, the very upper echelons, let's call it, apex predators in the big law market, again, are going to have the expertise and the bespoke work that makes sense to go to them for particular types of matters. Once you start to get below that tier, though, it becomes very complicated. And if your only differentiation is your relationships and, we're geographically located here and we've got that's pretty thin. And so I do think that reckoning and reconsideration of actual strategy and value prop will creep in. And I think Marlene's completely right. There's all these, let's call it vestiges of, firm structures and the way things are done and how we measure, success and revenue that make it very, very difficult to be innovative and nimble. And so some of those things will be rethought, I'm certain, but it'll take, I think, a lot of pressure to shake those things out.
I agree, and I think to a large extent it's a multi-tier strategy. So what we're doing is we're focusing heavily on the areas that we can add value. So financial services, banking, capital markets, those are the areas where we're strong and where we cannot be complacent. But I think we have a lead, and it's going to take a long time before the big four are going to enter those higher value stuff. I think the more commodity type work, we are sourcing much more efficiently by using more technology, better project management, and partially lower cost alternatives to deliver that kind of work.
So if I run a big law firm and I'm trying to be strategic about these issues, what do you think I should be considering when deciding what my mix of investments are going to be, whether it's internal tools to solve these challenges, working with outside legal technology providers versus working directly with clients to try to solve some of their internal problems with software or otherwise? It's a big question, right? But like there are many people who run large law firms right now who are thinking about exactly these issues and trying to figure out, like, how do we assess what our value proposition is and how do we make our assessments internally now?
If we knew that, I don't think we'd be doing our job.
I think you'd be doing exactly your job.
Well, I think I am actually partially responsible for thinking that I'm part of Laudable, our innovation and best delivery and business change group. And what we are looking at is how can we bring technology to bear to be more competitive. I would, as with any problem, there's never one big lever that you pull and the problem is fixed. It usually you turn a bunch of different knobs and levers. And so I would focus on technology for the boring stuff. Make sure that you get your act together on billing and expenses, and that it doesn't take you 30 days from start of a bill to getting the bill out of the door, which is still the case in many law firms. But that's all really boring stuff that is not 2020. Then look at the way you practice. Do a time and motion study of the transaction types that you do time and time again, and re-engineer the way you do those transactions. And that may be hard because you're touching on my work is special, the snowflake argument, but a lot of it isn't special and a lot of it is repeat stuff, and you can make those more efficient by using the right tools. Then I would look at tools that, because you've done something the same way for the last 60 years, doesn't mean it's right anymore. And this is where I put a plug-in for Casetext, which is you no longer have to rely on the duopoly of West and Lexis, but look at alternatives as a firm and try to make cost savings there. So what we've seen, and I mean, in my position as board member at Casetext, is firms that are looking at Westlaw and Lexis and are saying, can we get rid of one of them and replace the one that we have gotten rid of by Casetext and adding in additional functionality. So I think those are some of the strategies that I would employ if I was managing partner at a law firm. In addition to all of the strategic things that evolve around focus on one particular practice area or a series of practice areas or geographical strategy.
Well, I mean, I'll look at it from sort of my perspective. So where I will focus is sort of education and making people aware, awareness, getting them involved in decisions to to move forward with certain technologies, and being enthusiastic about them. They shouldn't become as like, well, you gotta really sell it. And so you got to give them the business case. Why is this useful? And really show them real world examples. That seems to work quite well. And, the what's in it for them. I mean, why, it's not about this is trying to replace you. This is about how this is helping you do the stuff you want to do. And, involve them in that discussion, involve them in the decision making, and highlight how this works well for their clients. Because then people seem, it's a lot easier to get people to move in that direction.
Sure, it's Alex's original point. What's your value prop? It's the same question. It's the same question we're asked all the time and are very prepared to talk about. Everyone should be asking that question.
Yeah.
I guess in back to the pandemic for a moment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more point, and I am actually going to use the A word, even though it may be too early. Atrium, and one thing that I would also focus on is actually business development. Business development within law firms is behind the game. And the one thing that Atrium did extremely well, beyond the concept, which I liked, I think they failed on the execution, but their business development was actually extremely strong. They managed to enter or to build a law firm business of somewhere around $20 million in the course of a year, and there's many law firms that would really desire to achieve that, and I think they did that by focusing on new ways of doing business development and customer success. So I think that's I was very much focused on that.
So, I know we talked a little bit broadly about what are the types of challenges that people are going to be most focused on fixing. And we're talking about, the boring, the immediate. Based on your experience, are there particular types of legal technology that you think law firms should be considering investing in as part of their response to the current pandemic economic situation, or particular types of qualities in the companies they're working with that they should look for?
You want to go first, Marlene?
Well, I mean, I could go. I was going to see if Alex wanted to go first. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't. Oops.
Oh, he's picking on his camera.
I think maybe he lost the signal again.
I scared him. I'm sorry. All right. So I'll go first. That's fine. So some of the things that I'm seeing that I'm hearing about are, and we've hit on some of these earlier. So contract management and contract life cycle, and that seems to be a big focus. And again, we're getting a lot more interest in those types of products. Contract automation and working with multiple products to kind of get that automation and that flow moving in the way that we want. Data visualization has been very big for us too. We've basically, people are getting, large amounts of data, and they want to present it in a different type of way, and something that's really more easily digestible. And so we've been doing a lot and seeing a lot of, Power BI types of things, and, depending whatever software you use, but, being able to put that into, different types of areas. So it's not just sort of the standalone thing, you have it, where you can move it around and show clients, or you have it in portals or, things like that. I'm seeing data analysis become a lot more interesting to people, which, might not be something you would think about, but again, there's a lot of opportunity there in terms of, going through large amounts of data and, putting it in a way, going through it, figuring out things that are important and surfacing that up. And you're also seeing things like, digital signatures, e-notaries, that type of stuff is being discussed as well. I think Alex is back.
I am. My internet just went off again, so apologize.
No worries.
And so if I remember correctly, the question was like, what areas are we seeing activity in terms of both investment and or just general interest?
That, and also just based on your perspective, what do you think should law firms be looking at right now, particularly in the current economic climate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a little bit of this earlier. It's a lot of the boring stuff. And so, back to the concept of, if you show me what you measure, I'll tell you what you care about. And I think that, a lot of firms are underinvested in, both time capture and frankly, e-billing. Just very basic stuff, especially if your unit of measure is the billable hour. I think that we've seen a ton of activity just from a financing perspective, and also commercial uptake of legal spend management platforms. I think that that's in response, frankly, from, most in-house and or like private equity firms in the case of some of the legal spend management platforms saying, we need to get a better handle on, our external legal spend, and in some cases hold our law firm providers' feet to the fire, but in also some other circumstances, just rethink how we get the base level of information to source. And that sort of takes me to, I think, what would be potentially very interesting to invest in or just kind of explore. I do think we will see, over, the immediate to near-term future, a real focus on having the tools to be able to effectively multi-source legal services by in-house. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a GC today, I've got a bevy of options for different types of work, maybe outside of the bet the farm litigation and some of the really high-end bespoke work where I have kind of my very trusted relationships and very few firms that I would go to. But on the commodity, more high volume work, the list of providers has really exploded in the last 5 to 10 years. And so I think having the information to be able to decipher what is my best solution, dollars for outcome, and how easy is it for me to, source those providers and move forward and get the work done, I think will be very interesting and something that, for me, I'm definitely, I would think is a very important area to sort of think about. But again, that's less so from a law firm perspective and more so from a general legal tech ecosystem perspective.
Interesting. So we have a few more minutes left, and I want to make sure we get out any remaining advice that we haven't discussed up until this point that you would share with law firms that are still trying to figure out their strategy when it comes to legal technology investments, both internally and externally.
I'd say any law firms that are not our competitors, I would recommend stay in the Stone Age that are our competitors.
No, you're speaking as an expert in this right now, not just from your firm.
No, but I think law firms have to invest in technology just to make their practice better, to answer clients better. I think the stronger ones are the ones that were investing and were able to move online pretty much immediately. But there's still a long way to go. So I would encourage law firms to invest in both the boring stuff, moving your document management systems to the cloud, pretty much move everything to the cloud, investing in security so you can work more efficiently, remotely and safely. Make the investment in more efficient matter or how you practice law and leverage technology much more. And do it in collaboration with your clients. I think that's the most important part is ultimately clients are the ones who are paying the bill, and they are expecting a different and better way of working.
Marlene, we lost
You're
her
on mute,
for a second.
Marlene.
I can go. Do you guys hear me okay?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
So I think from my perspective, it is, again, to reiterate, I think doing the basic building blocks of what you need to run your business more efficiently in a remote work environment. And so, again, that's e-billing, time capture, that's collaboration, that's, the infrastructure investments in, better, cloud, providing, solutions and really thinking about even support. I mean, it's one of the things that Haroon, brought up earlier, the idea that you can no longer like walk over and, get an IT professional to help you with an issue is like a really real thing for many of these professionals. And so I think there's a lot of like immediate just triaging of taking, what is has been forever an in-person type of working environment within law and turning it into one that is remote first and enabled. And then beyond that, I think, again, my view is that the most important function in terms of defining your long-term differentiation as a law firm is probably the knowledge management function, which, in some places have really invested in the last couple of years. But I think most firms remain very underinvested in that category. And I think we'll see technologies that can support that function, but you kind of need a person there who understands the needs and the direction where you can create a strategic advantage to that function. And then you can build the technology to wrap around that and support that. So those are my thoughts on it. But, sort of the immediate stuff is all very, very boring, but very necessary.
Well, I'm going to add on to the really excellent points that Jeroen and Alex mentioned. I will add basically stay aware of sort of what's out there, what's developing. It's good to focus on the things that you need to start working on now. But you should be kind of looking. We've talked about that 3 years. It's like see what technologies are starting to percolate now, and then like 3 years from now, they're going to be something that's useful. I mean that's my model. And the other thing is invest in your people or your staffing, however you're setting that up. And I know that sounds a little odd given this discussion, but invest in staff that have the right skill sets that you need, or train them to do so. Invest in lawyers that, I'm sure many people have heard about, like the Delta model lawyer. Seek out people like that have not only, the theoretical legal skills, but also have the business skills, have the technology environment that we're talking about.
I think that's such an excellent point. Almost never is technology a full solution, right? It's technology supporting great people with great skill sets trying to do great work. I think all those comments were really right on. The one thing I'll add, just from my perspective, obviously do the boring and basic things really well, but don't miss out on opportunities for big leaps forward with reputable, well-funded companies that are doing interesting things that are providing concrete financial benefits to your firm, as well as supporting you and your staff in doing great work. I'm not talking about anyone in particular, maybe Casetext, many others. But on that note, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I thought this was a really interesting conversation. This has been streamed on all of our channels and has been recorded, so we'll be circulating it. And for all the viewers, please keep an eye out for our next episode of the advisory board, where I expect Jake will be back in the driver's seat. And if you have any questions about business issues in the legal industry that you'd like to hear from the experts on, please visit casetext.com/advisory-board or tweet us at Casetext any questions or topics that you want to make sure that we cover. Thank you, Jeroen, Marlene, and Alex. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.